morning and welcome to our session on Introduction to Trauma-Informed Care. My name is Lisa McGarry and I am a resource teacher with Social Emotional Learning, and with me today is...
Good morning, everyone. It's Christina Johnson, also known as Shay. I am also a Trauma-Informed Care District Resource Teacher, Social Emotional Learning.
We are so excited to be with you today as you go through your new teacher orientation, and we are going to walk you through one of the trainings that we do in our department and ways to support our trauma-exposed students. Throughout our training, we are going to talk about the impact that trauma has on our students, look at how important the invisible backpack that we all carry is, get some strategies for supporting our students, and then understand that impact of working with students who have been exposed to trauma. With all of our trainings, we include a self-care alert. So if need be, please feel free to step out and take a break. Do something relaxing as you're going through this training. Do some deep breathing. Take some time to text a friend, phone a friend if that's what you want to do. Something that will help you stay engaged in our training or come back to our training when you're ready, because sometimes when we talk about trauma, it brings up our own feelings of trauma, and we don't want you to be overwhelmed with any of that as we go through this training. Okay, one of the goals of our department is to create trauma-sensitive schools throughout JCPS. And when we talk about trauma-sensitive schools, we are talking about schools that have a shared understanding amongst all staff. When we're talking about all staff, we're talking about certified staff, whether it be teachers and administrators, as well as the classified staff. So many assistants, office staff, custodial staff, cafeteria staff, understanding that our students have gone through some things that may have been traumatic, and we need to be sensitive to that. Understanding as well that learning behavior and the relationships they have with their peers as well as with adults may be impacted with that. And our ultimate goal is to understand that holistically, we have to make our students feel safe. So not just physically safe, we have many things in place in JCPS to allow our students to feel physically safe in our schools, but we also need to focus on them feeling safe socially, emotionally, as well as academically, allowing them to know that failure is okay and growth is expected, so that they feel like both of those things can happen in a safe space without being criticized or called out by teachers or peers, that this is something safe for them to be able to empower themselves and to go through this journey as they continue to become educated. When we look at trauma, we need to give it a definition so that we're all coming from the same frame of reference. And then we want to look at how it manifests itself in students. So when we talk about trauma, we understand that it is something that poses a real or perceived threat. Now, why do we include that word perceived? Part of that is because we are working with children, and the threats that they may perceive may not be ones that we as adults perceive. At my age, I might not be afraid of the boogeyman, but there might be children who are in elementary school, maybe even middle school, who are. If you think about people who are afraid of spiders or snakes, it doesn't affect everybody, but for some of us, that is a threat, therefore can be traumatic in an experience. The other thing that I want to make sure I point out is that traumatic experiences don't have to be major incidences. They could be small things that we react to, whether it be some kind of experience with an ice cream truck that was negative, and then you hear the sounds of the ice cream truck. That might be traumatic for somebody. Also understanding that if you have been bitten by a dog, that could be a traumatic experience when you are around other dogs. It might also be something like a house burning down, or community violence, or losing a loved one.
Hey, Lisa.
Tragic manner, yes.
Yeah, I was looking at the event of the unique experience and the perception that led me to an incident. I was at Target with one of my friends, and it was about 8 o'clock at night, and a white van drove past us, and my friend lost it. Oh my God, there's a white van. I'm like, what is going on? And she said, you know, the white vans, they kidnap people. And that was her own unique experience and her own perception of that event. We were both there at the same time. We saw the same thing, but she perceived that white van as a threat. And that was very traumatic for her because she linked that with the kidnappings that were going on. So it's definitely the person's unique experience and perception of the event.
Absolutely. And thank you for making that point. Because the other thing that I want to make sure that we talk about is that we can't judge, and we won't always know students' experiences. So when we are trauma sensitive, we understand that people have different experiences. I'm not afraid of spiders, but I tell you what, if I see a cave cricket, I will jump on furniture. Don't want to be around them. I know many other people who could just stomp on them and have no issue. It is not something I like somebody to pick up and try and touch me with. I will turn and run, maybe even fight somebody over a cricket. So absolutely, we can't judge and say, well, you shouldn't be reacting that way. And you could tell me that about a cricket, but guess what? It's still going to happen. So understand.
Are you talking about a cricket in your basement?
Yes, ma'am. I used to have a room in the basement, and I would yell for my younger brother to come and get them. I would jump on my bed.
Unique experience. All right.
So again, understanding and being sensitive to everyone having their own personal experiences and the ways in which they may react to that. Now, if we were all together, we would do an activity where you would get up and move around the room and put some Post-its on, some posters talking about some traumatic experiences that your students have gone through and how it impacts the classroom. But Shay and I are going to just have a conversation and tell you some of the traumatic experiences that we know about or maybe have witnessed with students, and then the impact that it did have or could possibly have. So Shay, what are some traumatic experiences that you can think of with students?
Well, I'm going to use my very own son, and he's 13 years old. And the other day we were driving through a neighborhood, and we saw people were arguing, and we heard gunfire, and we saw the people running. We were in our vehicle, so of course I left the scene, and we came home, and later on the news we found out that someone had passed away, someone had got shot, murdered. And so my son has to take that traumatic experience and deal with it his own way. And I'm giving him tools, but our students are coming in with similar traumatic events. Divorce is really, really high in the classrooms right now. Separation, that's traumatic. A lot of our kids are not in the foster care system because of drugs. Parents are having to give up their kids. So those are just a few of the things that our kids, I know for sure, are coming to the classrooms with.
I can think of a student in particular that it was almost heartbreaking to me. Was living with her mom, and there was a boyfriend in the home. And I don't know if there was any follow through, but the boyfriend definitely tried to hit on this girl. She was an 8th grader. And when she would report it, nobody would believe her until it finally got to the dad, and then he pushed things through. But it was, one of those experiences. But the thing that was saddest to me is that it was only a couple of weeks later that she was talking to me, and it would be like, Shay, you and I talking about how the weather is. Like, it's just another part of life. So there was an impact for her in that we saw behaviors from her in dealing with that, but her words, and when she had a conversation specifically about that, was just like, it's just one more thing in life, Mr. Gary. So lots of different things that could be going on in homes with students. Sometimes they can't handle it. Sometimes they can't verbalize it, and you're going to just see the behaviors from students. Other times they are going to try and tell you in some way. And sometimes it is a bunch of cuss words and not telling you, hey, this is what's going on with me, but telling you, you know what, there is something going on with me. Other times they're going to shut down and they're not going to say anything. Right. So there are many different ways that we're going to see this manifest itself in students and in the classroom. Do you want to add something else?
Yeah, we have to be really careful of the students that withdraw and the students that shut down, because some teachers think, well, that's one of the good kids. She never says, or he never says anything. You have to be careful with the quiet ones and try to get a relationship with them as well, because everyone carries a backpack and we're not sure what is in their backpack.
or even how they're going to necessarily respond to it.
And I'm talking about the invisible backpack. We'll learn more about that.
Here is a list, not a comprehensive list, but a list of some possible traumatic events that students may have gone through. And I'm just going to highlight a couple based on training that I have done, where we'll get questions, or people will say, oh, you know what, that one kind of stands out, or I didn't think about that one. The first one being the chronically chaotic environment. And I have gotten many questions. People say, you know, can you give me an idea of what that might look like? And I can tell you about a specific student. I had a sixth grader that I worked with a couple years ago who every day I would try and check in with her, you know, hey, how are things going? Where did you all stay last night? Sometimes it was the car. Sometimes they got money from dad and they could rent a hotel. Sometimes she stayed with her grandma because she knew she could take a shower and she could have something to eat. Sometimes it was at a friend's house, but always something different. And you could talk to her every day and she would say, I don't know who's picking me up today. I don't know what time I'm getting picked up. Sometimes it was her sister. Sometimes it was a friend. Sometimes it was mom. That's a chronically chaotic environment. I can only imagine the other details of her life. Those were just the things that she shared, never really knowing what was going to be there. There was not consistency, not always knowing if she was coming to school the next day. And that was a consistent thing for her. But having always to feel like, oh my gosh, it's just another thing. What's, you know, one more. Oh, okay, something else is coming. So again, never having that consistency or routines or knowing what's coming next. Another one that stands out or people will make comments about is terrorism, and say, you know, not working in schools maybe where you have students who are from foreign countries and maybe experience that themselves in those countries. But I always like to point out that every month or every couple of months, we have to do drills in our schools for a form of domestic terrorism. So we prepare our students for school shooters. So our students, whether they came from a war-torn country or not, have experienced terrorism to some extent, whether it be firsthand or not at all, secondary from the news in the neighborhoods, or just from those drills. I don't know experiences, but, you know, having students who completely melt down, like, what if somebody's able to get in here? And sometimes those drills, even though they're meant to offer support and feelings of safety, can also bring about trauma because of the worry, of the anxiety. Well, we have to prepare for this, so maybe it's happened somewhere and I just don't know. Those are two that stand out with this list. Shay, you want to add something?
I was looking at the community balance. That's going to be really huge when our students return back into the classroom, because everyone, some way or other, was affected, whether it was looking at the news, listening to what mom and dad had to say about it, just looking out of your own front door. And so we have to be really sensitive when the kids come back into the classroom with the community balance and the protests and what everyone is seeing and talking about along with the COVID. They're almost like in a time, because it's all there. It's all hitting us at once. So I think our job as educators for this one, the community balance, is just to be a listener and respect that they do have an opinion and something to say.
I want to just add something else to that it's very important, and we talk about this through all of our training, that it's so important to build relationships with our students, that Shay's talking about that respect, and you don't know necessarily how people receive the things that you say or the ways in which you say it if you don't have some kind of rapport or build that up. That there are ways, because Shay and I know each other well, that we can speak to each other that we couldn't speak to others, because we have that relationship. We've built that. You could not walk into a classroom day one and start talking about whether it be well-intentioned or not, start talking about some of these issues. You have to build that level of respect with our students, and then get to that point to where, okay, we can start having these conversations. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about is grief and traumatic grief. When we talk about death, it is not something in and of itself necessarily traumatic. I mean, it's a part of life. When you look at the life cycle, we're born, we live, and then we die. So there are times where death is not traumatic. My grandmother lived to be 98 years old. It was expected when she passed that it was coming. It was not a traumatic experience for me. For her children, my dad and his siblings, it might have been, but it was not. She was not my caretaker. She got to be a grandmother in my life. So there it was not. But several years ago, I worked with a student whose grandmother was her sole caretaker. She was getting up in age, and maybe not as old as my grandmother, but getting up in age and was ready to pass on. The months leading up to it were so traumatic for this student because her stability was getting ready to be ripped out from underneath her. And I could go through her story and tell you why, not even necessary, but that was her sounding board. That was her safe place. That was very traumatic. And when I was working with her, her grandmother hadn't even died. So understanding that sometimes it is, as people reach the end of their life, just a natural passing, but other times it's very traumatic. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a violent or unexpected way, but again, it can very well be. The other thing that's important to note is that if there is not a support system in place to help deal with that process, there will likely be some backlash that we'll see from students. And sometimes they will not even know why or where it came from. And it could be months down the road. You think, okay, well, I know you lost your grandmother over the summer, so we get to be close to November, should be okay. Well, there could be triggers. I talked to another student who said on Sundays she cooked with her grandmother. So maybe not every Sunday, but there were some Sundays, and maybe those ones getting close to the holidays, because grandma's not around to help with the cooking, might also bring that back up. And especially if it's, hey, grandma died, we had the wake, we had the funeral, and we got to keep it moving. If there's not somebody there to say, I understand why you're feeling the way that you're feeling, and let's process this. We want to also move into looking at some statistics. So this is a national average that 1 in 4 students has been exposed to trauma. If we talk about JCPS, that number is going to be a whole lot higher. And it would have been a whole lot higher prior to Corona. Now that we have gone through this pandemic, now that there is unrest in our society, we could get to where it is closer, I would imagine, across the board to 3 out of 4. Now, granted, there are some schools in JCPS where this might be an accurate number for their students, but there are some that you can't walk into a classroom and find a student who hasn't been exposed to trauma. It's 4 out of 4.
I would agree. Yeah, I would most definitely agree. Even like you said, before COVID and before the protests and the violence that's going on, definitely close to 4 out of 4. And we have to understand that back to trauma is in the eye of the beholder. Trauma is the perspective of that student. And so some students being homeless, some students, hey, I've been homeless before, I got over it. It wasn't traumatic for me. That's their trauma, and so it's different for every child. Every child experience is so different. So I most definitely think, Lisa, it's almost 4 out of 4 now.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Now let's talk briefly about why all this matters. Why are Shay and I taking your time to talk to you about this? So there was a study that was done that looked at adverse childhood experiences and the effect that it had later in life, looking at the physical effects, the psychological effects, as well as the development as these children became adults. It was a comprehensive study, and the results were compiled. It's called the ACEs study, so the Adverse Childhood Experiences. It looked at abuse, neglect, and overall household function. There are resources that are available, and you'll have this in larger format, but we're going to go through it just real quick. So when we look at this, you can see the breakdown that physical, sexual, and emotional abuse was looked at, emotional and physical neglect, and then there were some things broken out for household dysfunction. Shows you the population as well as what the risk factors are. And with the 10 questions, if people answered yes to 4 or more experiences, there were many outcomes that were not positive. that we can see and health effects, both physical and mental health, as well as risky behaviors taking place. With that, let's look at some ways in which we can support students. So here's our first of several strategy alerts. I'm going to just highlight a couple. The first one being so important as you start planning your new classroom with teaching those routines and expectations. Part of what we do is support teachers in schools, and I worked with several new teachers and would have conversations going in and talk to them about, do students understand the expectations and the routines of your classroom? Oh yeah, I taught those for a couple of days at the beginning. You all, I taught in the classroom 15 years. And my 15th year, I had a class that I taught routines and expectations every single day that I had them. There was not a day in that school year that I did not review expectations. Granted, many times you can say you're going to have to do it at least 2 weeks. And I taught middle school, so my classes changed. So some of my other ones, I didn't have to go all year long. But there were times where I had to remind them when they went home for Christmas and came back, okay, you all tell me, what's it look like when we line up in the hallway? What's it look like when you come into my classroom? Oh, everybody forgot? Okay, let's practice. Not only telling them, but making them practice, putting it into motion, getting some muscle memory. Those are so critical. And it's not something that we get to say, okay, Miss Johnson, when you come in my room, I need you to find your seat and then get out your materials and get started. For many students, that's way too vague. What materials are you talking about? Because I got out my makeup and I'm ready to go. Not what we're talking about. So again, that is something that is so important. You'll see that it is something that's sort of echoed in the first and the third bullet, looking at the positive climate, structuring the classroom, that those routines and expectations are going to be the foundation for the others. The other one that I want to make mention of is building those positive relationships with unconditional regard, understanding that students are people. They are not behaviors. They are not the mistakes that they make. They are not the harsh words that they say or the reactions that they have to things. They are people just like you and I. They respond to things. They do things wrong. And we have to understand that they are not innately bad. Sometimes they have misjudgments or missteps, and be understanding with that, allowing them that safe space to do so, make those mistakes and grow. So you want to add anything on this one?
I do. I really like the last one. Build positive relationships with unconditional regard. So I'm a church girl. So, the pastor would say, love the sinner, but hate the sin. So we need to love our students unconditionally, but let them know that we really don't like the behaviors that they display. The behaviors come with a face, and that's going to get to us a lot. But please, please, please remember there is a purpose for the way they are behaving. You got to remember that and tell yourself that over and over again. There is purpose to why they're acting this way.
Okay, Shay, it's yours to take away.
Yeah. So now we're going to talk about what does traumatic stress look like. Now we're going into the behaviors of it. We know what trauma is, but what's the behaviors that we're going to see along with it? So traumatic stress, it's the physical and emotional response of a child in a threatening situation. For example, if a child feels there's a boogeyman under her bed, he or she is going to wake up screaming, running down the hall, jumping on the bed. Mama, daddy, there's a boogeyman. There's a boogeyman. That is the behavior for the threatening situation, right? So what is the behavior going to look like? Well, I'm going to tell you what, when you are so overwhelmed from just being from anxieties, from stress, what is your behaviors with that? All right, now take it a step further. What is a child's behavior look like when their parents are going through divorce, when they are homeless, when they're going through a breakup, when they can't do the work, when they're going home to domestic situations? I'll tell you this, domestic violence and child abuse rates are higher than ever before. Higher than, maybe because of the COVID, maybe we're just locked in, seeing each other when everyone's getting on our nerves, but it's extremely high, and behaviors such as abuse is coming out of that. Trauma overwhelms your capacity to cope. So when you cannot cope anymore, there is a behavior that comes along with that. And that's what traumatic stress, that's what that looks like. So there is a whole wide world with the word trauma. Carl Sick, I hear your mental mechanisms a little bit clicking. What does this have to do with the world and the world trauma on it? Trauma affects the person's whole entire world. Go more, Lisa. Okay, so it affects their mental, physical, their psyche, their behaviors, everything. Trauma affects everything in this child's world. This is another strategy alert for our trauma exposed students. What I like on this one is avoid labeling. When they are out of your classroom, they have enough labels thrown at them, right? Dummy, lazy, ugly, poor, black, fat. They have so many labels thrown at them. And we are pleading with you when they come into your classroom, turn that around and make yourself a cheerleader for that student. You are so smart. You are brilliant. You are powerful. You are loved. I care for you. Those kind of things. Avoid labeling our students. Please do that because they have enough labels going around as soon as they leave the classroom. Another one, anticipate difficult times and provide additional support. What do you mean, Shay? All right, you ask great questions. Anticipate difficult times. We know those times are going to come when you're going to have a sub in your classroom. And some of our trauma exposed students, they do not like new people. They're strangers to them. So it triggers them. So we have to provide additional support. So if you know that you have to go to the dentist to get a tooth pulled, can you tell Mr. Smith, listen, I'm going to get my tooth pulled. I need you to take Larry. Take Larry. He really gets along with you. And I'm going to let Larry know that I'm going to be out tomorrow. That's providing support, right, for additional times. Utilize logical consequences for inappropriate behavior. You are going to get something at the end of this PowerPoint, a resource dealing with logical consequences for inappropriate behavior. If a student walks out and slams your door, right, what is the consequence, the logical consequence for that? It should not be losing the major field trip at the end of the year, right? So we have to make sure that our consequence fits the misbehavior. You may go, Lisa. All right, so what areas are influenced by trauma? It's right in front of you. Most definitely, they lose faith in the world as a safe place, right? And so verbally, teachers need to say, and I'll tell you what I tell my kids all the time, within these four walls, Miss Johnson has you. You are safe here. I cannot control what happens outside of my classroom, but I tell you what, you are safe in my four walls. I'm going to make this a safe place for you. And some students really need to hear that and feel that. They no longer trust people. They no longer trust that people will protect them. Right? That goes along with the losing the faith in the world as a safe place. So you have to build that trust. We signed up for this, right? We want to change children's lives. We want to make the world a better place. You signed up for this. So let's build that relationship so that they will be able to trust us. Physical health. Trauma most definitely affects the physical. Go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's also, I think, important to remember that even if we do something to break that trust, or I think about, a student that I got upset with and I yelled in her face.
Yeah.
You know what I did? And I mean, I messed it up and she probably would have never spoken to me again.
Yeah.
I went back later and said, you know what, I was wrong. This is why I responded the way that I did. And I'm not trying to justify it. I was wrong. So going back and repairing that, I mean, is so important because some kids never get that from anybody. They don't feel worthy of trying to rebuild that trust, but don't feel like you have to be perfect as a teacher.
That's so powerful.
Yes.
That's so powerful. Even when we apologize to our kids, it's like, what? Mama? Yeah, that is so powerful. That's building relationships because guess what? The divorce rate is really high because mainly communication. Mm-hmm. So if we can communicate with our students, we can build positive relationships. Is it going to take work? Absolutely. Is it going to happen overnight? No, it's not going to happen overnight. It's gonna take a while. It's gonna take a while, but keep pushing. All right. So areas also influenced by trauma, the emotional regulation. You are going to see different feelings, all the feelings we like to say, the feelings of fear, the feelings of anger and shame, helplessness. This all overwhelms the child's ability to cope. So guess what? The K-PREP test and your assessment that you work so hard to give them, maybe that's not the priority of the day for that child. Maybe the child is thinking, will mama come home today? Or will the lights be turned on today? So we're going to see and feel all of these emotions. The children will have a hard time self-regulating themselves. So what do we have to do? We have to teach that, just like we teach a math lesson. We have to teach how to bring calm back into the children's bodies. And that has a lot to do with deep breathing and inviting mindfulness into the classroom. Lisa? Also, communication. You'll have that student that maybe in the 5th grade, but talks like he or she is still kindergarten, 1st grade. That's because trauma has intervened with their life. Trauma has come into their life. And yeah, so think about it like this. A child that has been abused or sexually abused or assaulted, when he or she is questioned by authorities, it is very difficult to tell you every single thing that has happened, right? Because trauma, again, overwhelms the capacity to cope. So if you look at it like a file cabinet, and I'm trying to give you details about what happened when I was assaulted, all the thoughts are all scattered. So it's very hard for a child to tell you what is going on in his or her life. It's going to be very difficult communicating, right? But we have to have the patience and the know-how to say stop, all right? Take a deep breath whenever you're ready. Okay, so put that in your backpack. Our students that have been through trauma also will have, most of them will have a negative expectation about themselves and about others around them. I don't like myself. I'm ugly. I'm fat. I'm too this. I'm too that. Right? That has a lot to do with trauma exposure. And they will attack you because their world is not a beautiful place. So you can't teach. You ugly. Your husband's fat. I hate this classroom. I hate this school. The lunch is, they're just going to come with it. But we have to realize, this may have a lot to do with being trauma exposed. Lisa, were you going to say something? Okay, so next, here's another strategy alert. I want to stick with the first one. All of them are important, but my favorite on this one is allow student to save face. And what do you mean? Don't embarrass. Do not embarrass your students. Why? Because they have a classroom of their peers, not yours. It's their peers, their friends. And whatever jokes they're going to throw at you, they're going to have 22, 23 people laughing at you and with them about you. So don't ever, ever embarrass them. They have enough of that, right? They're going to come back and they're going to come back real hard. And there are some things that they can say that you cannot say back, right? Never use threats, always empower. We are the kids, we are their cheerleader, right? When they come into the day, we need to make sure that hour or 55 minutes or the whole day that you cheer them on. You said you wanted to change children's life. You said you wanted to empower. This is your time. Every day is not going to be easy. We know that. We know that. But you are your child's cheerleader. We don't know what goes on at home. We don't know. And sometimes they're not going to share. So empower, empower, empower. So we're going to watch a short video about the trauma lens, and I'm going to go ahead and let it play, and then we'll talk about it after this.
Kid, every time I'm pulling out, he's right there. Man, and someone needs to talk to his parents if they're ever at home. What is up with the traffic today? And always, every day, this intersection's always crowded. I hate pulling out of here. Maybe some of these dumb roads. Oh, there's... Okay, so I'm not even here. Right. Great lady. The princess of parking. Oh, sure. Take the spot. Way to be considerate. Oh, you kidding me? Unbelievable. Oh,
Thank you, ma'am. Have a great day.
it's about time. Let's see, what do I want?
Yeah, could I add a cookie to that order?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, no problem, only guy in the world. I'm sure you need your cookie. The world, your oyster, and he's serving your cookie.
Thanks,
Thank
sir.
you so much.
Uh-huh. What can I get for you?
Yeah, I'll have a tall decaf macchiato.
Yeah, sure, no problem. You're $3.85. And it might take a few minutes here. We've got quite a line, obviously, and thanks for your patience.
Great. Yeah, great. Great for me. Winning again. Unbelievable. What? What is... What is that? What in the world? Oh, what? What am I supposed to do? How can I do anything about that? Can I even help with that? I don't.
Your coffee, sir.
Oh. I can't take this anymore. I gotta get out of here.
Hey, watch it.
So sorry.
Hey, buddy, come here.
All right. I wish I was in front of you all so we could really have a good conversation about this. So basically, the trauma lens lets us know now. What's the question that we asked, Lisa? You remember? Not what.
Oh yeah, not what's wrong with you, but what's happening or what's going on.
Yeah. Thank you. We've changed it. When the kid comes in and flips over chairs first thing in the morning, it's not, child, what is wrong with you? Now we are asking to ourselves, what has happened? What has happened? That's all we want to talk about when we talk about the trauma lens. What has happened to our students because of the behaviors that they are showing? All right. All behaviors serve purpose. What has happened to this child that wants to cuss out every adult she comes in contact with? Right. No one gets up in the morning, yawns, stretches him or her hands and says, today I'm going to get on all my teacher's nerves. I can't wait. Yeah. Something is going on with that behavior. So It's the why. It is the why. Okay, Lisa? All right, and so I want to share with you the invisible backpack. I mentioned it earlier about things being in our backpacks. Now, the trauma-informed care modules are not only good for students, it's good for adults too. Why? Because we need to know that all of us carry invisible backpacks, right? Backpacks that are filled with negative thoughts, backpacks that are filled with negative experiences. And we carry these everywhere we go. We carry these. And so what we need to realize is that our students, every last one of them, they'll have the Victoria's Secret backpacks and the Nike backpacks and the cartoon backpacks, but they also have a negative backpack that is so heavy. Sometimes we even say they're doing a carry-on because it's so heavy that there's things in there that we have to sort out, and we're going to see the behaviors behind the backpacks. Lisa, did you want to add anything to this?
No, I just think about our own backpacks that we carry and think about the times where my back hurts the most and I haven't done any exercise or anything out of the ordinary, that's when I really have to stop and think, okay, what emotionally am I carrying? What issues are going on in my life? Because I literally feel like that my feet are moving through mud.
Absolutely.
That heavy.
Absolutely. So we have to stay mindful that it's not just students, adults, teachers, staff carry invisible backpacks too, right?
The other thing I wanted to add too, Shay, something that came to mind with watching that video is that we have to remember, you mentioned earlier that sometimes those behaviors, come with a face.
Yes.
And we take them personal.
Yes.
That putting those glasses on reminds us that it's not always about us, that the 4.5 minutes that he has to wait in the line or whatever it might be, it has nothing to do with him or somebody taking his spot. They're not thinking about him. They're thinking about themselves. So we have to find those ways to not take the behaviors of our students personally.
Absolutely. Before you switch, Lisa, I want to add this on. You may ask, so these students are coming into my classroom? Absolutely. And they will have invisible backpacks. And we want you to use the trauma lens. But this is what we need more than anything. If you don't remember anything else, our trauma exposed students need 3 things. They need to know and feel safe. They need to know and feel that they are competent in something. They need to know and they need to feel worthy of being in your classroom, in your space. Can you make that happen? Can you make that happen for every single child? It is going to be difficult. Some days are going to be really difficult, right? But for our trauma exposed students and all of our students, I'm going to say, they need to feel safe, need to know that they are competent and that they feel worthy to be in your classroom. And they need to hear that. Jessica, you are a champion in math, right? Robert, I'm so glad to have you in your classroom. You know, Miss Johnson got your back, don't you? That kind of thing. And developing those relationships, they will feel safe and competent and worthy. Okay. Oh, repacking the backpack. Yeah. So we know that they have heavy backpacks. We know it's coming. And sometimes we have heavy backpacks too. So we need to replace the backpacks. How do we replace the backpack? Well, we are going to create students experiences that facilitate, here we go, facilitate a space where they feel safe, competent, and worthy. You are going to receive resources on how to do that. We have it all typed out for you. You just got to do the work. Making your students feel competent, finding their gift, because every student has a gift or more, right? It's just digging and finding that. They need your help with that. Not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight, right? What has happened to them did not happen overnight. So we have to be mindful that I'm working with this child. I'm not seeing results. Keep working. And we need to know that to develop a good relationship, we have to be realistic. You have to be realistic. You have to be truthful with that child. You have to go the extra mile. And I tell teachers all the time, that student that you are having a difficult time with, tell me what you've done. Tell me what you have done to make the relationship last. And I say, one thing you can do is have lunch with them. Give them your 20 minutes and just say, today, me and you are going to have lunch. There's no peers around to act silly with. Right? So that's one example that you can do to build a relationship. Lisa? All right, we're closing out. And if we were in your building or in your space, we would give you a sheet and it would have a square, triangle, and circle. And so you can think to yourself, or you can jot notes down, what squared with your thinking during this presentation? What thoughts match your thoughts? Like, yes, I knew we were going to get some students that had trauma, right? Yes, I know I need to create a safe environment. The triangle, what points do you want to remember? Please do not forget about the trauma lens and the invisible backpack, and definitely promoting a safe environment. There's so many other points, right? Remembering that trauma overwhelms the child's capacity to cope, right? So it may not be their day of learning, but thinking of something that's going on at home. The last one is what's circling, what is still circling through your brain? What questions do you still have for us? Okay, Lisa? Here's your take-home messages. Trauma is very common. It's not uncommon, it's very common. It compromises psychological as well as our physical safety. Child's functioning and learning are negatively impacted by traumatic stress. So if a child is going through trauma, this child may not be your student in the classroom that makes straight A's, plus, right? Understanding the trauma lens can assist us in understanding what the child is going through. Remember, we are now asking not what is going on, but what has happened. Not why they're acting this way, what's happened to this child. Not what is wrong with you, what has happened to this child for this child to have this behavior in my classroom. Lisa, you want to take us out of here?
Well, just if anybody has any questions, any follow-up, Shay and I, or one or both of us will be on for questions. But if there's things further than that, please feel free to email any of us on the screen. The top is our boss. The second is another resource teacher, but it's Christina and myself. Christina is Shay. But email us if there's other things that you can't find the resources, or you want something extra as you get started in your classrooms. Please reach out.
Yeah, we have tons of resources. The social emotional learning team has tons of resources. We are here for you. And it's absolutely FREE exclamation mark.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Welcome to the World Teaching.